far away from the bright blue planet called Earth. The stars stretched like silver dust across an endless dark sea. Out there, in a quiet region known to explorers as the Clarion Expanse, life had settled into a strange kind of peace. Traders drifted between colonies, miners dug into lonely asteroids, and scientists studied strange creatures that floated through the void. It was the kind of calm that makes you forget how dangerous the galaxy could be. For years, most alien empires barely noticed the humans. The Terrans, as they were called beyond Earth, were considered newcomers to the cosmic stage. They had built their colonies slowly, sending out ships one by one, claiming pieces of land no one else wanted. Other species watched them from a distance and whispered that humans were fragile, too emotional, too scattered, and far too young to survive among the great powers of the stars. But not everyone ignored them. There was a race called the Rylax, known for their cold logic and endless hunger for expansion. Their world was covered in fog and metal, their fleets sharp as blades. They had fought many wars and crushed anyone who stood in their path. When they heard that small human colonies were growing near their trade routes, they didn't see it as a threat. They saw it as opportunity. To them, Terrans were a small species trying to play at empire. The Rylax commanders believed they could easily force humans to pay tribute or abandon their colonies altogether. They sent out their ships, fast, sleek, and armed with plasma cannons, to capture human transports. The first few attacks went unnoticed. A freighter here, a cargo ship there. The Rylax called it clearing the path. But soon, human settlers began to vanish without a trace, and stories started spreading among traders who managed to escape. One pilot told a story about seeing a Rylax ship fly straight through a human outpost, burning everything before disappearing back into the mist of space. Another described hearing a distress call that ended with a single terrified word: "They're here." The colonies grew nervous. People stopped sending children to mining camps. Lights stayed on all night in orbital stations. But Earth remained quiet. At first, the Rylax took this silence as weakness. Their leader, a man driven by pride and ambition, believed that humans would never fight back. "Terrans are nothing without their little blue world," he told his officers. "They build fast, but they break faster." He ordered his fleet to strike harder, to show every nearby system that humans couldn't protect their own. Then came the attack on Eden's Reach, a small but growing colony built on a green world orbiting a twin-star system. It had schools, gardens, and families. It was home to thousands of people who believed they were safe under the flag of Earth. The Rylax didn't see it that way. They wanted a message, and they made it cruelly simple. Their fleet arrived without warning. The sky above Eden's Reach turned red as plasma fire rained down. Defense towers tried to fight back, but their weapons were too weak. Within minutes, the colony's communications went dark. No one escaped. When passing traders found the planet later, they described it as a silent graveyard of smoke and glass. News of the attack reached the Terran High Command 3 days later. For a long time, there was silence in the war room. No one spoke. No one moved. Then someone said quietly, "They killed civilians." That one sentence changed everything. Up until that moment, humanity had stayed away from war. After centuries of fighting among themselves, they had promised peace when they stepped into the stars. But Eden's Reach broke that promise. The people of Earth watched the images of the destroyed colony on their screens, and something deep inside them shifted. The fury they had buried for generations woke again. In the following weeks, every major Terran fleet was recalled. Communications went dark. No one outside Earth knew what was happening. Traders who tried to enter Terran space were turned away without explanation. Rumors spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Some said humans were preparing new weapons. Others said they were hiding, too scared to face the Rylax. But there were a few who noticed something else. Movement. Hidden deep within the Sol system, something massive stirred near the orbit of Mars. Scientists and engineers who had worked there for years suddenly disappeared from public records. Whole shipyards went silent. There were whispers about a project that had been started long before humanity ever made contact with aliens, a secret plan to build something that could defend Earth if the unthinkable ever happened. No one outside, the Terran military, knew what it looked like or if it even existed. But if it did, it would be humanity's first and last line of defense. The project's name was never spoken aloud. It existed only in classified files and in the minds of a few people who believed that one day, humans might have to remind the galaxy what they were capable of. While the galaxy debated, the Rylax prepared for their next move. Their commanders gathered near a narrow passage of space called Archon Point. It was a perfect place for an ambush, a funnel between two massive asteroid fields, where large ships could be trapped and destroyed. They expected the humans to send a small fleet or a handful of patrol ships to investigate. The Rylax had 50 warships waiting for them, all armed and confident. As the hours passed, their scanners picked up nothing but background radiation. No Terran ships, no transmissions, just silence. The crew started to joke among themselves, mocking the humans. Maybe they're too scared to leave their planet, someone said. Maybe they know better than to fight us, another added. Their laughter filled the communication channels. Then a single blip appeared on the radar. At first, they thought it was a sensor error. It was too big to be a ship. The object was moving slowly, steady as if it had nowhere to be. The readings didn't make sense. Its power signature was enormous, and its mass was beyond anything they had ever seen. The bridge crew fell silent. One officer tried to scan it again, but the system overloaded and shut down. "It's not a fleet," the navigator whispered. "It's one ship." The commander frowned, thinking it was some kind of trick. "One ship?" he repeated. "Humans are sending one ship against 50? He smirked, but no one else laughed. The mysterious object grew larger on the screens. Soon the Rylax ships could see it with their own eyes. A distant glimmer of metal reflecting starlight, moving through the darkness like a mountain sliding through the ocean. As it came closer, its shadow swallowed their radar. Its hull was black, its edges marked by faint glowing lines that pulsed like a heartbeat. It didn't send any transmissions, no demands, no threats. It simply approached, calm and steady. Then a voice finally came through the comm channel, flat and human. "This is Terran Command," it said. "You have entered Terran space. You attacked our people. Leave now." Every Rylax ship listened in silence. The commander, feeling insulted, ordered his communications officer to respond. "This is Rylax Dominion Fleet. You are surrounded. Surrender your ship and power down your engines." But there was no reply, only the hum of static. When the mysterious Terran vessel came close enough, they could finally see it fully. It was bigger than anything the Rylax had ever built, 5 kilometers long, its surface covered with thick armor and weapon ports large enough to launch entire shuttles. It wasn't designed for beauty or speed. It was designed to survive. Fear rippled through the Rylax crew. Some whispered that it wasn't a ship at all but a weapon, a machine built to destroy worlds. Others refused to believe it. The commander stood tall, forcing confidence into his voice. "Fire at will," he ordered. Thousands of plasma bolts streaked across the void, lighting the darkness like a storm. The energy hit the Terran ship, but instead of breaking apart, its shields rippled like water. The glow spread across its hull and then vanished, as if it had absorbed the attack completely. The Rylax stared at their monitors, stunned. "No damage detected," the sensors reported. The commander gritted his teeth, shouting for another volley. Again their weapons fired, and again the Terran ship stood untouched. The silence that followed was heavy and cold. The crew felt something they had never experienced before. A quiet, creeping fear that came from realizing they had made a terrible mistake. That was the moment when every rumor, every story, every whisper about the humans stopped being funny. Because for the first time in their lives, the Rylax saw what humanity had built when pushed to the edge, and as the massive Terran Battleship turned its colossal guns toward them, every heart aboard those 50 ships knew. This was not the beginning of a battle. It was the beginning of an ending they would never forget. The moment the Rylax fleet saw that their weapons had done nothing, the bridge fell into a silence so deep it felt like space itself had swallowed the sound. The Terran ship didn't move quickly or aggressively. It just floated there, calm and silent, its huge frame glowing faintly under the light of the distant sun. The ship's armor shimmered with a quiet hum, like the slow breathing of something alive. Inside the Rylax command ship, the crew was frozen in disbelief. They had fought hundreds of battles before and seen many kinds of technology, but nothing like this. Every sensor they had was trying to read the Terran ship's structure, and every result came back the same. Error. The data didn't make sense. The ship was too big, too strong, too quiet. It was like scanning a piece of space itself. The commander tried to calm his crew. He told them it was probably a trick, that maybe the humans had created some kind of false energy reading to make the ship look stronger than it really was. But deep down, even he didn't believe it. The way the ship moved, steady and without fear, didn't feel like a trick. It felt like confidence. The Terran ship finally spoke again. The voice that came through was human, calm but firm. "This is the Terran Battleship Nemesis. You have attacked human colonies and killed innocent people. Leave Terran space now." The message repeated once, then silence followed again. The Rylax commander clenched his fists. He couldn't let fear spread. 50 ships against 1. Those were odds he had won with before. He gave a single order: attack again with everything. The fleet obeyed instantly. The sky lit up once more as hundreds of plasma beams and missiles tore through the darkness. Explosions danced across the stars. But when the light faded, the Terran ship was still there, not even a mark on its armor. One of the Rylax officers whispered, "That's not possible." Another muttered, "It absorbed all of it." The commander glared at them. "Keep firing! It has to have a limit." But the fear had already begun to spread. The crew's hands were shaking as they reloaded the cannons. They didn't want to admit it, but it felt like they were shooting at a mountain. Inside the Nemesis, the crew worked in silence. No one celebrated their ship's strength. They weren't there for glory. They were there for justice. The captain stood near the main viewing glass, his eyes fixed on the enemy fleet. Around him, officers monitored the situation, their screens showing wave after wave of incoming fire. The ship's shield system held firm, its energy levels barely moving. "Enemy fire is ineffective," one of the officers said softly. The captain didn't respond. He was thinking of Eden's Reach, of the burned colony, of the families who had once laughed under its twin suns. His jaw tightened. He gave a quiet order: target their lead vessel. The main weapon systems of the Nemesis powered up. The sound was deep, like thunder rolling beneath the hull. The railgun coils glowed bright white, and magnetic energy filled the air. Everyone on board could feel it, a vibration that made their hearts race. Back on the Rylax command ship, warning alarms went off. The sensors showed a massive energy spike coming from the Terran vessel. "It's charging a weapon," someone shouted. The commander tried to issue evasive orders, but it was too late. A single streak of light flashed across space. No sound, no explosion, just pure speed. The Terran projectile cut through the void faster than the eye could follow. It tore straight through 4 Rylax ships, one after another, like paper. For a moment there was silence. Then came the explosions, 4 suns blooming in the dark. The Rylax fleet panicked. Their communications filled with voices yelling over each other. Chaos spreading from ship to ship. "They destroyed the front line. We've lost the cruisers. They hit us once, just once." The commander's voice cracked as he tried to restore control. "Hold formation," he shouted. But no one listened. The fear was too deep now. Ships started to pull back, some trying to flee, others spinning out of formation. The carefully arranged fleet turned into a storm of confusion. From the bridge of the Nemesis, the captain watched without emotion. He didn't want to kill them all. He just wanted them to understand. But as the enemy ships scattered, some continued to fire in panic, their plasma bolts flickering harmlessly against his ship's shields. "Return fire," the captain ordered quietly. The Nemesis responded with precision. Its side batteries opened, releasing bursts of kinetic slugs and focused energy beams. Each shot found its target. Ships exploded one after another, their lights vanishing like dying stars. In less than 10 minutes, the once proud Rylax fleet was gone. Only a handful of damaged vessels remained, limping away into the void. The rest were silent wrecks drifting through the emptiness, their metal frames still glowing from the heat of destruction. When the last gun fell silent, the Terran ship powered down its main weapons. The hum faded. The stars slowly returned to their natural brightness. The captain stood still, his face unreadable. Around him, the bridge crew said nothing. There was no cheer, no applause. Just the heavy realization of what they had done and what they had become. For the Terrans, it wasn't victory they felt. It was justice. Cold, painful justice. Meanwhile, news of the battle traveled fast. Across nearby systems, traders and scouts picked up fragments of transmissions. The voice of the Nemesis repeating its message. The last screams of the Rylax fleet before silence took them. Every listening post, every outpost, every alien commander heard the same story. The Terrans sent one ship, they said in disbelief. Just one. In the following days, the Rylax Dominion tried to hide the truth. They claimed it was a trap, that the Terrans had used hidden weapons or outside help. But the survivors told a different story. They spoke of a battleship so vast and powerful that even 50 ships couldn't scratch it. They described a weapon that fired once and ended everything. They said the humans didn't shout, didn't taunt. They simply acted, like a force of nature. The galaxy listened, and for the first time, it began to fear the people of Earth. Back on the Nemesis, the crew prepared to return home. The captain gave the order to recall all drones and stabilize the reactor. As the ship turned toward the distant glow of the Sol system, one of the younger officers broke the silence. "Sir, do you think they'll come back?" The captain looked at the stars, his voice low. Not for a long time. Outside, the battlefield drifted in silence. The wreckage of the Rylax fleet floated like broken statues, a warning carved into the darkness. Every survivor who escaped would carry the memory forever, the image of a Terran battleship emerging from the void and ending an entire armada without effort. Somewhere, deep in the galaxy, other empires began to discuss what this meant. The old powers, the ones that had laughed at humanity's small colonies, now spoke in whispers. They studied every sensor log, every detail of the ship's movements. No one could understand how humans had built such a vessel in secret. Some called it impossible. Others called it destiny. But among humans, there was no celebration. On Earth, the leaders addressed their people. They didn't speak proudly of power or victory. Instead, they honored the lives lost on Eden's Reach and every colony that had suffered before. The message was simple. We did not seek war, but we will never allow another to destroy our people again. In every home and outpost, people listened in silence. They knew that the galaxy had changed. From that day forward, humanity was no longer seen as fragile newcomers. They were survivors, protectors, and builders of something that even the oldest empires had to respect. As the Nemesis continued its journey home, it left behind a trail of quiet awe. It didn't stay to collect trophies or prove dominance. It didn't even chase the survivors. It simply vanished into the vastness, returning to the shadows it came from. And yet the story spread. Traders told it at every port. Children in distant colonies whispered about the day a Terran battleship appeared like a phantom and ended a war before it began. Some said they saw it again far from any star, watching silently. Others claimed it was just a myth. But everyone agreed on one thing. If you ever saw that ship with your own eyes, it would be the last thing you'd ever see. The Rylax Dominion never recovered from the loss. Their leadership fell into chaos, their fleets grew cautious, and their pride, the same pride that had led them to attack humans, turned into fear. They no longer sent ships near Terran space. They no longer mocked humanity in their speeches. Instead, they rebuilt quietly, pretending that the war had never happened. But the galaxy remembered. Every commander, every politician, every species learned a single unspoken lesson that day. Never underestimate the people of Earth. For now, peace returned to the stars. The silence after the storm was heavy, but it carried respect. Somewhere in the darkness, the Nemesis drifted on, unseen but never forgotten. It didn't need to show itself again. The message had already been delivered, and across the galaxy, whenever someone spoke of the Terrans, there was always a pause, a moment of quiet, as if even saying the word battleship demanded a kind of reverence, because those who had seen it never saw anything again. The first time anyone saw a Terran battleship was also the final time. After the great silence that followed the battle, the stars seemed to breathe again. The wreckage of the Rylax fleet drifted slowly, their twisted metal reflecting faint light from a distant sun. Among those remains floated reminders of arrogance and fear, ships that once believed themselves unstoppable, now nothing more than dust in the void. But the Nemesis didn't stay. It turned slowly, its engines glowing like a calm heartbeat. Without a word, it began its journey home. It didn't chase the survivors. It didn't send messages of victory. It just left them there to think about what they had done. For the Rylax survivors, that silence was worse than defeat. It meant the humans weren't angry anymore, they were beyond that. The Terrans had made their point. They didn't need to say anything. Their actions had already spoken louder than any threat could. Back in Terran space, the Nemesis was greeted not with parades or celebrations, but with quiet respect. The people who saw it return from deep space stood in awe. Some saluted, others simply stared. It wasn't just a ship. It was a reminder of what humans could build when pushed too far. In the Terran command hall, the highest-ranking leaders met behind closed doors. The battle was over, but the echoes of it would last for generations. They watched recordings taken from drones and sensor satellites. The moment the Nemesis fired, the collapse of the Rylax fleet, the shockwave that rolled through the stars. The room was silent. One of the senior officials finally spoke. "The galaxy knows now," he said softly. "They'll either fear us or leave us alone." Another responded quietly. "Fear is not what we wanted." But everyone in that room understood. The war wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. Humanity had always been underestimated. By others, by themselves, even by history. Now the entire galaxy had seen what humans were capable of when cornered. While the leaders debated, the crew of the Nemesis finally rested. For weeks they had trained, prepared, and waited for orders that might lead to their deaths. Now they were safe, but their hearts were heavy. Some couldn't sleep. Some kept reliving the battle, the bright flashes, the explosions that lit up the void. One young technician sat alone in the observation deck, looking at the stars. He whispered to himself, "We didn't win. We just stopped losing." His words were simple, but they carried the truth that everyone felt inside. On Earth, people gathered in front of screens, watching official reports. There were no grand speeches, no talk of victory. The message was calm, respectful, and full of sorrow for the lives lost on Eden's Reach. The people didn't cheer. They listened. They understood that power without purpose was dangerous, and the Nemesis had shown the universe just how dangerous humans could be, if provoked. Still, not everyone saw it the same way. In the far corners of the galaxy, other empires began to worry. The powerful Keldan Syndicate sent their spies to learn everything they could about Terran technology. The Eleven Collective, a peaceful but ancient race, sent envoys to Earth with offers of alliance, hoping to avoid future conflict. And even those who had once mocked humanity now avoided their borders entirely. But among the Rylax, chaos had taken root. The loss of 50 ships in a single battle had shattered their pride. Their leadership was divided. Some wanted to rebuild and seek peace. Others demanded revenge, though deep down they knew it was impossible. They didn't have the strength anymore. Their fleets were weakened, their morale destroyed, and their people frightened. The commander who had led the attack on Eden's Reach was missing. Some believed he had died in the explosion of his flagship. Others claimed he escaped in a damaged pod drifting through deep space, haunted by what he had seen. There were rumors that he left behind a final log entry, a single line repeated again and again. "We should never have touched the Terrans." The galaxy had changed overnight. Star maps were redrawn, alliances shifted, and everywhere the story was told, people said it the same way. The first time they saw a Terran battleship was also the final time. But while the universe whispered, the humans worked. Inside the hidden shipyards near Mars, engineers studied the Nemesis, making repairs and analyzing every system. The ship had performed perfectly, but it wasn't without scars. Its hull carried faint marks of battle, small scratches where plasma bolts had struck before being absorbed. To anyone else, they would have seemed meaningless, but to the crew, they were reminders that even the strongest weapon could still bleed. The captain of the Nemesis met with the engineers quietly. He didn't speak much. He simply asked for one thing, to make sure no ship like this would ever need to fight again. "We built it to protect," he said. "Let's make sure that's all it ever has to do." Outside the shipyard, the stars glowed softly. Earth's moon hung bright in the distance, a small but eternal witness to everything humanity had achieved. People back home began to dream differently now. For the first time in centuries, they didn't dream about escaping war. They dreamed about holding peace. Meanwhile, deep in the clearing expanse, scavenger crews picked through the remains of the Rylax fleet. They found pieces of ships burned so completely that their metal had fused with space dust. Among the wreckage, they discovered fragments of armor that carried strange marks, shaped like clawed streaks melted by intense energy. Some believed it was a warning left by the Nemesis itself. a silent reminder that power should never be used to destroy the innocent. Those scavengers told stories in every starport they visited. They spoke about how quiet it had been before the first shot, how calm the Terran ship seemed, as if it already knew how the fight would end. They said its guns didn't roar with rage, but with purpose. The listeners often went silent after hearing those words. Even those who doubted the story could feel the truth behind it. In time, traders began calling the region of space where the battle happened the Grave of 50. Ships that passed through would lower their lights and slow their engines, a quiet show of respect for those who never made it home. Some said that if you listened closely while crossing that area, you could still hear the faint echo of a human voice repeating, "You attacked our people. Leave Terran space." But the truth was, no one dared to come close anymore. The grave was left untouched, drifting forever as a silent scar in the galaxy's memory. Back on Earth, the Terran leaders made a decision. They wouldn't build another nemesis. They didn't want to turn humanity into a symbol of fear. Instead, they began working on something new. A peace network that would connect colonies and outposts through communication and trade. They wanted the next message sent across the stars to be about unity, not war. And yet, deep inside the nemesis, the crew knew they could be called again someday. The universe was vast and peace never lasted forever, so they stayed ready. They maintained the ship, trained quietly, and waited for orders that they hoped would never come. When night fell on Earth, children still looked up at the sky and asked about the day humanity showed its strength. Parents told them the story, not with pride but with warning. They said, "We built that ship not because we wanted to fight, but because we had to protect." The children listened, their eyes wide, imagining the dark ocean of stars where that enormous ship drifted silently, keeping watch. In a quiet room inside the Terran command hall, one old officer sat before a screen showing the stars. He whispered to himself, "It's strange. We always thought our wars ended when we left Earth. But maybe the real victory was remembering who we are." The stars outside shimmered faintly, as if they understood. And far away, in the darkness beyond the colonies, something stirred once more. The nemesis floated in the void, silent and patient like a sleeping guardian. Its hull glowed softly in the reflection of a dying star, its systems alive and aware. No one knew where it was. No one knew if it waited for another battle, but the universe remembered the last time it appeared, and that memory alone was enough to keep the peace. The humans didn't call themselves conquerors. They didn't build empires. They just built one ship, strong enough to make the entire galaxy stop and think. And somewhere, across millions of stars, beings of every kind whispered the same words in their own languages, each one meaning the same thing. Never again should we test the Terrans. The galaxy moved on, but the legend of that day lived on, traveling faster than light, passed down by traders, scholars, and dreamers who looked at the stars and wondered if, somewhere out there, that dark, silent battleship still watched over them. Because once you had seen it, you could never forget it, and for those who hadn't, they prayed they never would. The memory of that single battle refused to fade. Across the galaxy, people still talked about the day the Terran Battleship appeared from the darkness, fought a fleet of 50, and left without a single word of pride. It was more than just a story now. It had become a warning, passed quietly from one system to another. Every captain, trader, and soldier knew it by heart, but for the humans, life slowly began to move forward again. The world was healing from what had been lost. The destroyed colonies were remembered through simple monuments, small stones placed under the stars with the names of those who never came home. There were no grand speeches, only quiet prayers and shared silence. On Earth, people had mixed feelings. They were proud that humanity had survived, but afraid of what it meant. The Nemesis had shown what humans could do when they were threatened, but also what they were capable of creating. It was a machine built for peace but forged through pain. Some called it a guardian. Others feared it might one day become a curse. In the Terran Command headquarters, meetings were held every day. The question wasn't about building more battleships, it was about what to do next. Should they expand? Should they stay quiet? Should they reach out to the same galaxy that once ignored them? Many leaders believed it was time to show who humans really were, not as warriors but as builders and explorers. So they began sending envoys, peaceful ships carrying supplies, medicine, and knowledge. They wanted the universe to remember humanity for kindness, not just power. But even as peace efforts grew, the shadow of the Nemesis lingered in everyone's mind. It had become more than just a ship. It was now a symbol, one that carried both hope and fear. Deep in a hidden dock near Jupiter, the Nemesis rested. Its black hull reflected the light of the gas giant like a dark mirror. The ship was quiet, its systems powered down, but it wasn't forgotten. Engineers still visited it every day, checking systems, polishing the armor, updating the cores. No one dared to call it retired, it was simply resting, waiting. The crew had been given new assignments. Many of them returned to smaller ships, some to Earth, some to colonies. But all of them carried the same memory. Sometimes when they met in quiet bars or on orbital stations, they would talk about that day. Not about the victory, but about the silence afterward. It was too quiet, one of them would say. You could almost hear the stars holding their breath. Meanwhile, the rest of the galaxy was changing. The Rylax Dominion, once proud and loud, was now quiet and divided. Their people questioned their leaders. Some wanted revenge, others wanted peace, and many wanted to forget. Their ships rarely left their own systems now, and when they did, they traveled carefully. They knew that somewhere out there the humans were watching, but there were still a few who couldn't let go of their pride. They gathered in secret, whispering about rebuilding the lost fleet. They told themselves that humanity had gotten lucky, that the Terrans had only won because of one ship. They believed they could find a way to fight back if they could discover how the Nemesis worked. So they sent spies. Quiet, careful agents who disguised themselves as traders and scientists. They slipped into neutral zones, made friends with human colonists, and tried to learn as much as they could. Most failed. Terran security had grown sharper after the war. But a few managed to gather scraps of information, small pieces about the ship's power core, its shield system, its weapon designs. What they didn't understand was that the Nemesis wasn't just a machine. It was built by people who had poured their entire hearts into it, scientists who had lost family, engineers who wanted to protect their children, soldiers who had sworn never to let another Eden's Reach happen. The Nemesis carried their hopes as much as their strength. That was what made it unstoppable. Back on Earth, a quiet day began like any other. The sun rose over the oceans, casting gold light across the water. But deep beneath the planet's surface, inside a control center buried under mountains, an alarm went off. It was faint at first, a small ping in the communication array. Then it grew louder. Operators rushed to their consoles as lines of data appeared on the screens. Something or someone was trying to access the old Nemesis files. Within minutes, Terran Command was alerted. The code was traced to an outer system, far beyond safe space. It wasn't human. Someone was trying to learn their secrets. A quiet unease spread through the command center. The Nemesis had been built for defense, not destruction. If another race managed to replicate even a fraction of its power, the balance of the galaxy could collapse again. A message was sent to the Nemesis's captain, who had been living quietly on one of Earth's coastal towns. When he saw the alert, he didn't speak. He simply stood up, looked at the sky, and said, "So it begins again." Within hours, the old crew began to return. One by one, they walked through the dock's long corridors, their faces calm but serious. None of them had forgotten how to work as a team. They didn't need speeches or orders. They knew what needed to be done. When the Nemesis came to life again, the shipyard lights dimmed under its power. The engines glowed blue, soft but steady, as if the ship had just been waiting for the call. The ground trembled slightly, and everyone watching felt the same chill run through them. It wasn't fear, it was awe. The ship slowly rose, leaving behind trails of vapor as it climbed out of the dock. Once again, the giant ship floated above the planet like a dark guardian. It didn't roar or flash. It just existed, and that was enough to make everyone watching understand what it meant. Humanity was awake again. In the following days, rumors spread across every communication network. The Nemesis had been reactivated. Some said it was only a test flight. Others believed it was preparing for war. Across distant systems, leaders sent encrypted messages to one another, trying to guess what the humans would do next. But the truth was simple. The Terrans weren't preparing for war, they were preventing one. The ship's sensors had detected signals near the same region where the Rylax Dominion had once gathered their fleet. It wasn't just random energy, it was organized movement like a buildup of ships. The captain didn't want to strike. He just wanted to see, so the Nemesis left Earth quietly. No public broadcast, no announcements. It passed through the stars in complete silence, a shadow among light. Every system it crossed grew quiet as its signal was detected. Traders stopped their routes. Patrol ships turned away. Even pirates who roamed those regions shut off their engines and waited for it to pass. In less than 2 days, the Nemesis reached the edge of the Rylax border. And what it found there wasn't a fleet, but wreckage. A broken collection of ships half-built and abandoned. The Rylax had tried to rebuild, but their efforts had failed. Their technology couldn't handle the same kind of power the Terrans had mastered. Still, the sight made the captain uneasy. He could see what fear had done to them. It hadn't brought peace, it had brought desperation. He ordered the ship to scan the debris field. Among the broken vessels, they found data fragments and messages. Some were angry, full of hatred. Others were cries for help. One message caught everyone's attention. It came from a Rylax engineer who had tried to stop the project. His voice trembled in the recording. "We thought strength would make us safe, but the humans were never strong because of their weapons. They were strong because they stood together." The bridge fell silent. Those words said everything. The captain gave a quiet order to his crew. Send a message. Not a threat, a warning and a promise. The transmission went out across the stars, reaching every major system. The message was simple. The Terrans do not seek war, but if any world threatens the peace we've built, we will stand again. The galaxy heard it loud and clear. In the weeks that followed, the tension began to fade. The Rylax Dominion publicly agreed to sign a peace pact, promising never to invade again. Other empires began working together, inspired by what they had witnessed. The fear of humanity slowly turned into respect. The Nemesis returned home quietly once more. It settled into orbit above Earth, where it could be seen from the ground on clear nights, a tiny dark shadow moving among the stars. People looked up at it and felt safe, not because it was powerful, but because they knew what it stood for. The captain and his crew finally disembarked, their mission complete. As they walked across the landing platform, the earth wind brushed against their faces. After so much time in the cold silence of space, it felt warm, alive. The captain paused for a moment and looked at the sky. "Let's hope," he said softly, "that this time, peace lasts longer." Behind him, the Nemesis floated silently, watching over its people like a patient guardian. It had become more than a battleship. It was now a promise written in steel and light. And somewhere, far beyond the human colonies, those who once doubted humanity whispered again in quiet fear and deep respect. The first time they saw a Terran battleship was also the final time. Time had passed quietly since the Nemesis last returned to Earth. The stars above had gone back to their calm rhythm, and for the first time in many years, the galaxy seemed to breathe in peace. Trade routes reopened. New colonies started to rise from the dust. Children on Earth grew up hearing stories about the great Terran battleship, not as a weapon, but as a protector that stood for unity. But even peace has its shadows. While most people moved on, there were those who couldn't. Some feared that peace made humanity weak again. Others whispered that the Nemesis should never have been put to rest. There were debates in the council chambers, heated arguments behind closed doors. Some believed that a sleeping guardian was enough to keep enemies away. Others thought that only constant strength could protect the peace they had built. The captain of the Nemesis tried to stay away from all this noise. He had returned to his quiet life by the sea, where he could watch the horizon each morning. To him, the ship wasn't a weapon to show off. It was a reminder of what war cost. He would sometimes stand by the shore at night, looking up at the faint light of the Nemesis moving across the sky and whisper, "Stay asleep, old friend." But peace rarely stays untouched for long. One morning, a strange signal reached Terran Command. It came from the edge of explored space, far beyond the old Rylax borders, from a region no one had visited in decades. It was faint, repeating every few hours, almost like a distress call. But the strange part was the code. It matched an old Terran encryption, one that hadn't been used since before the war. At first, the signal was dismissed as an echo, maybe an old probe sending its final message. But then more data arrived. The signal wasn't just repeating, it was changing, evolving. Someone or something was alive out there trying to talk. Terran Command analyzed it for days, then weeks. Finally, they decoded part of the message. It said, "We are here. We found something. Need help." The council called for an emergency meeting. Every major leader was there, seated around a long glass table that reflected the stars outside the orbital station. Some argued it was a trap. Others believed it might be survivors from a lost Terran ship. The room was filled with tension, silence, and unspoken fear. In the end, the decision was made. A small expedition would be sent. Not a warship, not a fleet, but a research vessel, escorted by a few defense crafts. The Nemesis would remain where it was, watching from afar. But as preparations began, strange reports started to surface. Ships traveling near that sector disappeared. Communication buoys went silent. And the faint signal grew stronger, almost as if it was calling directly to them. The captain was soon summoned back. He didn't want to go at first, but deep down, he knew what it meant. "If it's a trap," he said quietly, "then whoever said it is trying to draw us out. And if it's not, then someone out there needs help." A few days later, the Nemesis powered up again. Its engines came alive with a deep, calm hum echoing through the shipyard. People gathered to watch from the platforms below. Some clapped, some prayed, and some just stood in silence. The ship wasn't leaving for war this time. It was leaving for truth. The journey took 4 days through dark and empty space. The stars grew fewer and the silence deeper. The crew could feel it. The strange stillness, the absence of movement, like something vast was watching from the shadows. Then as they neared the coordinates, they found it, a massive structure floating in the void. It wasn't a ship or a station. It was something far older. A huge ring-shaped object glowing faintly with blue lights turning slowly in the dark. Sensors picked up fragments of Terran technology inside it. Small beacons, energy cells, things that didn't belong there. It was as if someone had taken pieces of human ships and built them into this strange alien structure. The captain gave a simple order: approach slowly. As the Nemesis drew closer, the ring started to react. The blue lights turned white, and strange waves of energy spread out like ripples across water. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then suddenly the signal that had brought them here began again. But this time it wasn't a message. It was a voice. "Terrans," it said, distorted but human. "Do not come closer." The bridge froze. The voice was old, tired, but it was unmistakably human. "Identify yourself." The captain replied calmly. The voice came again, breaking and reforming through static. "We were explorers. We found something. It's alive." The lights on the ring flared brighter and the Nemesis's scanners went wild. The readings didn't make sense, energy levels rising, structures moving. It wasn't just a ring. It was some kind of ancient machine, maybe even a creature. Suddenly, part of it opened, revealing a dark interior filled with pulsing light. And from within, something began to move. A massive shape, slow and silent like a living shadow made of metal and light. "Back away," the captain ordered. But before the Nemesis could react, a burst of energy hit the ship. The shields held, but every light on the bridge flickered. Systems rebooted one after another. For a few seconds, the crew couldn't see anything except blinding white light. When the view cleared, they saw it. The shape had stopped moving, just floating there, almost studying them. Then, for the first time, it sent a message of its own, not in words, but in images. Flashes filled the screens, scenes of ancient battles, civilizations long gone, entire worlds burned to ash. And then a single image of Earth appeared, glowing blue and alive. The message was clear. It had seen humanity before. The captain stared at the images, his hands tightening on the console. He understood. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't just reacting to them. It remembered them. He ordered the Nemesis to retreat slowly, not to fire. But as the ship began to turn, the strange object sent another burst of energy. This one didn't damage the hull. It reached into the ship's systems, reading them, copying data. In moments, the Nemesis's entire history was flashing across the alien structure. The crew could see it too. The Nemesis's creation, its battles, the loss of human lives, and the final message it sent of peace. When it ended, the lights of the structure dimmed. Then, to everyone's shock, it powered down completely. The ring stopped moving. The energy vanished. Silence filled the bridge. The captain's voice was calm but heavy. "It wasn't an enemy," he said. It was searching, learning, maybe remembering. They waited for hours, scanning for more signals, but nothing came. The structure remained still, like it had gone back to sleep. Finally, the Nemesis turned for home. On the way back, the captain stood by the viewing deck, watching the stars slide by. The crew around him stayed quiet, each lost in thought. When they returned to Earth, the council was waiting. Reports were made, recordings shown, theories discussed. Some called the structure a weapon. Others said it was a relic of an ancient race. But deep down, everyone felt the same thing. It wasn't finished. The captain said little during the meetings. He only gave one recommendation before he left. Don't disturb it again. Let it rest. Some things out there are older than our fear. That night, as the Nemesis settled once again above Earth, a quiet rain fell over the planet. People looked up and saw the faint glimmer of the ship in the sky, unaware of what it had seen. Life went on as it always did. Children played. Markets opened. Cities glowed. But somewhere beyond the edge of space, deep inside that silent ring, a faint blue light flickered once more. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't calm either. It was simply awake. And far away, aboard the Nemesis, one of the engineers noticed a small change in the ship's data logs. Something strange that hadn't been there before. A new entry, written in unknown symbols, quietly blinking in the corner of the system screen. He called the captain to see it. The captain studied it for a long moment, then smiled faintly and said, "Maybe it's saying thank you." No one knew for sure. But one thing was certain. The universe had just reminded humanity that it was far from alone. The Nemesis continued to orbit, silent and eternal, watching over the planet below. And across the stars, whispers began once more, not of fear this time, but of wonder. They said the humans had reached into the dark again, and the dark had reached back, not to destroy them, but to remember them. And for the galaxy, that changed everything. Months passed after the Nemesis returned from the dark edge of space. Life on Earth slowly returned to its calm rhythm, yet a quiet curiosity lingered. People couldn't forget the strange discovery, the ancient ring that had spoken, the light that had awakened, and the feeling that something vast had just turned its gaze toward them. For most, it became a mystery best left alone. Scientists wrote papers about it. Philosophers debated its meaning, and storytellers began weaving myths. Some called it the Watcher. Others believed it was the universe's way of reminding humanity that it was still learning. But to those who had been on the Nemesis, it was more personal. It felt like the stars themselves had whispered back. The captain lived quietly now, far from the noise of councils and speeches. His small house near the coast was surrounded by wind and sea. He liked it that way, simple, silent, peaceful. Every night he would look up and see the faint glimmer of the Nemesis crossing the sky, and it made him smile. One evening, as the sun dipped into the horizon, a soft tone echoed from the communicator on his table. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't a call from Earth Command, it was from the Nemesis itself. He frowned, surprised. The ship's AI was supposed to remain in standby, with no direct contact. "This is ground station receiving," he said softly. "Identify," a calm, almost human voice replied. "Captain, there has been a change." He stood up, his expression turning serious. "What kind of change?" "There is a signal," the voice said. "It came from the same region as before. But this time it is not directed to us, it is directed to all." Within minutes, the news spread across the Terran network. Every communication channel began to echo with the same strange message. It wasn't in any known language. It was rhythmic, musical, almost like a song traveling through the stars. Experts worked day and night to decode it. After 3 days, they managed to translate part of the message. The words were simple: "We remember." The room went silent when those words appeared on the screen. Nobody understood exactly what it meant, but everyone felt its weight. Earth's leaders gathered again. Some were afraid. They thought it was a warning. Others believed it was an invitation. A few scientists suggested sending a reply. The debate lasted for days. The captain was invited once more to speak before the council. He stood in the center of the room, hands folded behind his back, his face calm. "Whatever this is," he said, "it doesn't feel like a threat. The universe is full of echoes. Maybe this is one of them. Maybe they just want to be remembered too." The room was quiet. Finally, after long hours, the decision was made. They would send one message back. Not a signal of war or dominance, but a message of peace. The words were simple, broadcast through every frequency known. We remember too. Days passed. Then weeks. There was no answer. Some thought it was over. Another mystery lost in time. But late one night, as the Nemesis drifted silently in orbit, something unexpected happened. The ship's outer sensors detected a shift in space. Small, almost invisible, like a faint ripple. Then out of the darkness something began to appear. A beam of soft blue light stretched across the void, reaching slowly toward the planet. The ship's systems came online by themselves. Screens lit up, engines hummed faintly, and the crew, those who were stationed nearby, rushed to their posts. The Nemesis was waking up again, but this time, not because of war. When the captain arrived on board, the crew saluted him quietly. No one asked questions. They all felt it. Something was happening beyond their understanding. The blue beam didn't touch Earth. It stopped in orbit, forming a circle of light, like a gate opening between stars. Through it, faint shapes could be seen, shadows of ships, but not Terran or Rylax. These were something else. Their designs were organic, flowing as if grown rather than built. The communication system came alive again. The same voice as before, soft, ancient, filled with echoes, spoke once more. Terrans, you have awakened what once slept. We are not your enemies. We are not gods. We are the memory of what was lost. The bridge crew listened in stunned silence. The captain leaned forward slightly. Who are you? He asked. The voice paused for a moment, then replied. We were like you once, dreamers, builders. We reached too far and forgot why we began. We fought and we vanished, but our memories remain. You found them. The captain's voice softened. And what do you want from us? To see if you will make the same mistake, the voice answered gently. To see if creation will remember mercy. For a long time, no one spoke. The stars outside shimmered through the light of the gateway. It was beautiful and haunting, like seeing history itself unfold. Then the voice continued. We watched your wars. We saw your fury, and yet when given power, you stopped. That is why we remember you. The captain's throat tightened. He looked around at his crew. Ordinary people who had seen too much and still chosen peace. We're not perfect, he said quietly, but we try. That is enough, the voice replied. Then the light around the gate began to fade. Before it disappeared completely, the voice spoke one last time. When you look at the stars, remember that they are not silent. They listen, and then the light was gone. For a few seconds, the bridge was utterly still. The sensors returned to normal. The silence felt heavy but peaceful. When the captain finally spoke, his words were soft but clear. Record everything. This isn't just for us. It's for everyone who will come after. In the months that followed, humanity changed. The message spread to every world, every colony, every space station. People began to look at the night sky differently. No longer with fear, but with wonder. The great powers of the galaxy, Terran, Rylax, and many others, started to work together. The first joint exploration fleet was formed, not for war but for discovery. They called it the Dawn Initiative. The Nemesis was chosen as its lead ship, not because of its weapons, but because of what it represented, the courage to face the unknown without losing humanity. Before departure, the captain walked through the halls of the Nemesis one last time. He touched the walls gently as if greeting an old friend. The ship's AI spoke softly. Destination, Captain? He smiled. Anywhere we haven't been. The engines roared quietly, not with violence, but with purpose. From Earth's surface, people looked up and saw the Nemesis rise once more, brighter than ever, heading toward the deep unknown. As the ship passed through the edge of the solar system, the stars seemed to open like a curtain, revealing endless light beyond. The crew stood silently at the windows, hearts full of both fear and excitement. The captain looked at them and said, "Remember, whatever we find, we don't conquer it. We learn from it." Those words became the new creed of exploration. Not conquest, not domination, understanding. Years later, children on distant colonies would learn about the day the Nemesis left Earth for the final time. Teachers would tell them that the ship didn't go to fight or to rule. It went to listen. The stories would grow, as stories always do. Some would say the Nemesis found a new world where stars sang. Others would claim it disappeared into the light it once followed. No one knew for sure. But what remained true, what echoed across every human settlement, was this simple belief: humanity had faced the darkness and chosen compassion. And whenever people looked up at the sky, they could almost feel the presence of that old battleship, still out there among the stars, watching gently, not as a weapon, but as a friend. On quiet nights, when the wind blew softly and the sea reflected the starlight, some would swear they could hear a faint hum from above, the sound of engines far away, whispering through the void. Maybe it was imagination. Maybe it was the ship returning home for a moment. Or maybe it was the universe itself singing back the oldest truth of all, that those who remember peace will always be remembered by the stars. And so ended the story that began with fear and fury, but closed with understanding. The first time they saw a Terran battleship was also the final time, not because it destroyed them, but because it taught them what humanity truly meant. Would you like me to turn this entire 6-part story into a YouTube-ready script?